keep the rubber side down. This phrase, echoed by motorcyclists and motorsport enthusiasts alike, is an acknowledgement of the everyday risks associated with pushing our passionate vehicular experience to the limit. You've probably heard before,
don't get a Jeep, they roll over too easily.
But where did that actually come from? Today, we're going to be diving into the media circus, crash tests, and controversy that gave Jeep one of the most misunderstood reputations in automotive history. Recently, a number of prominent off-road events have unfortunately been overshadowed by some pretty unfortunate and uncomfortably spectacular Jeep rollovers. And so I thought it was worthwhile to try and unpack why this might be happening and what are some of the causes behind this social media and media sensation of, calling attention to the fact that Jeeps have the capacity to roll over. The unfortunate reality is we as off-road enthusiasts kind of wait with bated breath, kind of this ambulance chasing nature to watch a particular obstacle and driver attempt to navigate it with this deep-seated thought in the back of our brain that the next move could end in catastrophe. At best case scenario, there's just a great flop for social media. At worst case, somebody becomes critically injured and we may or may not lose access to a particular trail system because of damage and debris and, bad publicity that's associated with it. So where did this idea come from, and why are these current off-road events still dealing with these unfortunate rollover incidents? The idea that Jeeps roll over easily largely stems from a 1980 CBS 60-minute segment showcasing a Jeep CJ5 flipping during a J-turn.
I'm only going 8 to 10 miles an hour. But this is what can happen when the Jeep makes a J-turn at 22 miles an hour.
This aired shortly after the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, or IIHS, released a report suggesting the CJ5 was rollover prone. However, one can argue that the IIHS data was misleading. Out of 435 tests, only 8 rollovers occurred, and one Jeep had to be tested 87 times before it actually flipped. The tests also used extreme, unrealistic driving scenarios with automated controls, not necessarily real-world conditions. Despite this, the media frenzy caused an extreme drop in Jeep sales and a long-lasting damage to the CJ5's reputation, which one can argue led to the potential demise of the iconic CJ as we knew it. All right, before the keyboard warriors get all keyboard warriors, we're addressing the fact that we didn't address sport bars and roll bars, and that's intentional because, quite frankly, that's a way bigger subject than what we have to talk about today. But understand, we do know the difference, so do the engineers, so should you as a consumer, but this isn't that video. Government agencies like the NHTSA later criticized the tests as flawed and not representative of actual human driving behaviors. Still, many sources continued citing the discredited reports well into the 2000s, fueling the myth long after it had been disproven. I know as a young man who started legally driving Jeeps in the 90s, I was subjected to constant concern and criticism regarding my 87 Wrangler and whether or not it was too top heavy or had too much of a high center of gravity. There were all of these conversations that were kind of plaguing the automotive industry as a whole. After a myriad of lawsuits concerning the safety of SUVs like the Ford Explorer and the Jeep Wrangler, manufacturers like Jeep and Ford started directly marketing these vehicles for off-road use. It is a strategy that has continued to help expand these brands to this day. Now, there was an argument to be made for narrow wheelbase and leaf-sprung suspensions of the earliest CJs and then into the YJ Wrangler platform. But arguably, the Ford Bronco II actually ended more lives in rollovers than the Jeep CJ5 and 7 platforms. Ford actually admitted this in court.
And in fact, based on this report, which we received from your Ford lawyers, the Bronco II has an initial fatal vehicle rate greater than the Jeep CJ5 and CJ7. Isn't that true?
Somewhat greater, yes.
So the Bronco II has a worse initial rollover fatal vehicle rate than the vehicle you've referred to as an outlier. Correct?
That's correct.
Additionally, a severe lack of driver education or respect for the platform when using the Jeep both on-road and off-road, whether it be in stock or modified capacities, led to a number of unfortunate incidences in the most extreme conditions. And so therefore, an unfortunate legend was born. Now, as I mentioned, as a person who was personally subjected to this line of questioning, was why would you want to drive that? Or, hey, when you're going out with your friends and I was picking up somebody from their house, oh, maybe I don't want them to ride with you because those Jeeps are not safe and they're rollover prone. While I was inherently familiar with narrow wheelbases because at that time we did own a number of CJ2As and a CJ5. My YJ felt like a Cadillac by comparison with its heavy 35s and wide 2.5-inch leaf springs on the roughly 60-inch wheelbase width that, you know, the YJs and TJs and Cherokees all shared of that era. And so I personally didn't have a lot of concerns with just this sleepy Jeep syndrome where I just thought I was going to like randomly fall over on its side. As an automotive enthusiast who personally lived through the Ford Explorer Firestone tire debacle era, I was very familiar with SUVs that could lose control and inevitably wind up in a rollover incident based on component failure. But I had a healthy dose of respect for how I was intending to use my Jeep and the safety and kind of protocols that went into inspecting the components and parts that I used in the modifications and both on and off-road driving experiences. Today's modern Jeeps are arguably light years away from that early era, narrow, short, and light CJ platforms. But what are some of those safety and technological advances that benefit our modern off-roaders? Well, realistically, the coil spring suspension that were introduced, again, pseudo under the Cherokee Comanche, then again under the Grand, and finally in the Wrangler platform in 1997, offers a predictable spring rate energy transfer. Slightly a little bit different than leaf-sprung suspension unload and the geometry that would happen during hill climbs or extreme cornering maneuvers with that traditional leaf-sprung suspension. Today's Jeeps are wider, lower, and longer than we've ever seen a manufactured off-road vehicle from Jeep be. Couple that with the convenience of modern-day stability and traction control systems where the Jeep can independently brake free spinning wheels or sense a potential off-camber or extreme pitch situation. Arguably, we've created a scenario where we can take a less qualified driver and put them in the safest off-road situation they've kind of ever been in. The safety equipment that's actually engineered into the Jeep has created both the perception and the application of an authentic safety-first design where individuals can explore the great outdoors and not be concerned with that drafty, rollover-prone reputation that I personally experienced 20 plus years ago. How do the JL, JT, and WK2 Grand Cherokee stack up in terms of safety amongst the automotive community as a whole? Well, I guess all of these types of tests are at a federal minimum for production, and then the results are a little bit in the eye of the beholder. There's always this argument that can be made regarding what your cost-benefit analysis is going to be. If you're looking for an SUV where you can strip the cab off and maybe you have some cargo capacity in your vehicle and you want a solid axle design, then you're going to have to sacrifice some other aspects of vehicle production. That may be in the terms of side curtain airbags or occupant seat airbags. It might be even in the terms of the most extreme rollover testing, which Jeep engineers have constantly been trying to address. You'll even note that on the Jeep Gladiators, they added this goofy, long stick-off piece that's just behind the front passenger tire. Mum's the word was apparently to help in certain crash and impact rating, which may or may not result in some form of crumple zone or rollover situation. So when choosing a particular off-road vehicle or SUV that, might fit the majority of your interests, yes, we've had massive improvements in safety and reliability protocols, both at the engineering and at the federal regulatory levels. But ultimately, there is potentially always room for improvement, and there's always going to be a give and a take that you have to accept as the owner. So what does really cause a vehicle to roll over? High center of gravity in any vehicle can lead to a potential rollover. Absolutely not just a Jeep thing. You'll oftentimes see this on the highway, specifically geared towards our hardworking truck drivers. As you may note that there is a lot of signage on our highway systems denoting the pitch and grade of roads, but also when we're making high turns at speed. A high center of gravity, meaning the weight of the vehicle is above the chassis by so much distance, can create this sailboat effect, causing the vehicle to pitch and yaw while cornering at speed. Couple this with poor driving habits or inexperience behind the wheel, and regardless of what vehicle you're driving, you could absolutely find yourself in a highly precarious position. These situations aren't isolated to highway speeds and big trucks, but also improper lane changes and off-camber terrain while playing off-road. Additionally, what can affect everyone, again, be it off-road or on-road, is component failure. Now, in that moment, there are some things that you can potentially do. However, if you are an inexperienced driver, whether you are that individual doing donuts or cutting cookies in your high horsepowered car spinning in a parking lot, or you are a greenhorn off-roader who is navigating kind of a steep and off-camber rocky climb, experience may allow you to navigate that uncomfortable component failure or uneven terrain scenario and emerge unscathed. But if you are inexperienced, you may find yourself in a situation where you're accidentally shifting, throttling, braking, or losing control of the steering wheel in general, and inevitably actually making a bad situation worse. There are a number of things you can do to avoid these scenarios, and realistically, what you could or should, or maybe even shouldn't do when it does start to happen. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Now, I know that this old cliche is one that we've, thrown around for eons at this point, but there is an absolute reality to it when it comes to your successful off-road experience. Now, if you've watched or followed much of my socials, you'll know that I love LCG, or low center of gravity builds. Realistically, we only need 2.5 to 3.5 inches to successfully run massive rubber and have a great experience on and off road. Now, with that said, I am a product of the 80s and 90s, and therefore high center of gravity, or these monster truck builds, were something that absolutely caught my attention, and I still have this warm fuzzy place in my chest for, the triple roll bar KC lit monster trucks that you have to use a 10-foot extension ladder to get into. But I recognize that those vehicles don't actually perform well when trying to travel 75 miles per hour down the highway and then hit your favorite trailhead for an afternoon of fun. With that said, if you are trying to build a Jeep for off-roading by today's standards, I can't recommend enough to you that you explore LCG builds and not fall into the bigger is better when it comes to lift kits specifically. And realistically, the best possible way to prevent rollovers is keeping a low center of gravity and maintaining traction across uneven terrain. It is important to note that there's lots and lots of information regarding sway bars and disconnects and anti-rock technology, and a lot of that is going to be in the loose nut behind the wheels experience. I, for one, have kind of confidently and prolifically wheeled off-road with no sway bars, despite the fact that I would not necessarily recommend that to a consumer to do that. It is possible. Now, with that said, there is an argument to be made about when you actually get in too far of an off-camber situation and you can actually encounter something called suspension unload. That is kind of at the most extreme end of the experience, and there are a number of products out there that can help you address that situation if that is important or of value to you. Appropriate shock valving and travel is also going to be hypercritical to this conversation. You're going to want to make sure that whatever dampening components you have installed on the vehicle are going to be appropriately rated for the spring or other suspension setup that you have, whether it be coils or leafs or airbags. Whatever is your choosing, you're going to want to ensure that there's a predictable energy transfer between that spring for generic purposes and shock or dampener that allows that energy to be appropriately maintained and controlled all the way through its traveling motion. This is one of the benefits of buying a pre-produced lift kit for your Jeep, in the idea that you're putting your faith in that suspension manufacturer's engineering to say that they have appropriately set you up for success. Most of the mainstream suspension manufacturers have been around for long enough that their products are proven, their customer support is appropriate, and realistically, they're not looking to put you in an unsafe experience with their suspension modifications. I love to encourage new Jeep owners to get out there and just use their vehicles for what they are at a base engineering level, meaning kind of what they came off the showroom floor as. Use them and kind of get a good feel for what they are or are not capable of. As you progress in your own experience, so should the Jeep. There are ample opportunities for you to take introductory courses or classes at a number of reputable off-road parks from coast to coast. Additionally, online, you can join a number of social groups where they're talking about recovery or safety protocols, or in general, off-roading experiences that make you a better driver. Lastly, once you have modified the vehicle and you are ready to get out on the trails, hit the bunny slopes first. There's absolutely nothing wrong with getting to learn your vehicle intimately after modification. We really need to put our egos aside. And despite the fact that some Jeeps might have big blown V8s and slinky long arm suspensions, the reality is all of those things mean nothing if you don't know how to control your vehicle and your own emotions in an off-road environment. So choose a group, an individual, or an instructor wisely that can kind of be a good mentor or guide in those off-road experiences, spotting you and ensuring that you kind of go to the uncomfortable edge without both figuratively and literally flopping over it. Jeeps are not inherently dangerous. I'm fairly certain we've established that by now. But like any off-road capable vehicle, they require respect and smart driving. Use the best parts possible that you have available to you and maintain your vehicle frequently. I encourage all of you to do ample research prior to whatever modifications you may make on whatever model Jeep you're driving. Build responsibly and push yourself to learn proper driving techniques. Take a course, get involved with a recovery team, and practice your skills frequently. Jeeps are incredibly fun vehicles and a great community to belong to. The industry as a whole has continued to reinvest and become safer, more reliable, and overall giving you a greater experience both on and off road. So take advantage of it and allow history to be in the past. And I hope that we've educated you enough so that when you are having a conversation with someone who's maybe not part of our community, you can say, yes, I know where that myth came from, but no, it has nothing to do with today's actual Jeeps. And realistically, it was only mildly related to what was really going on at that time. So have you ever been in a rollover? Are you part of the Sleepy Jeep Club? Are you a 360 person? What kind of stories do you have to share? Make sure that you like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you can get notifications on all of the latest and greatest Jeep content. Additionally, if this was your first time visiting, make sure you go back and binge watch all of the previous content on buying used Jeeps or maintaining them. And, there's a number of ways that you can get involved with SFJ, and we'd love for you to be part of our Jeep family. Until then, Jeep on.